I love meeting new people and I love trying new things, and it's hard to be afraid of things if you try them.
It's Uncommon Good, the program where we talk with ordinary people doing uncommon good in service of our common humanity. I'm Pauli Reese. Fam, my guest today, Ashlie Castaldo. She is from Duluth, Minnesota. That's right, Minnesota. We're old college friends, but there in Duluth, she is a political and community organizer. Her two most recent work includes the racial bias audit for the city of Duluth, the actual city of Duluth, and she served as a messaging consultant for Undivided, which is a grassroots political organization focused on protecting democracy in the Northland. Important work in these days. We talked about an incredible slate of things, including how she found herself in college, the journey, what it's been like for her to get to community organizing and public service, how she's worked hard to cultivate empathy for others, and how she's been learning to thrive as a person with autism in a neurotypical world. I'm truly honored to have had this conversation with her. A quick content warning, potential trigger warning for you. We do talk a lot about mental health and trauma. Some of the things that she's witnessed are pretty rough, including abuse. And we do talk a little bit about suicidal ideation. So if these things are not right for you to hear, feel free, switch off, and we'll see you in the next one. Please enjoy my conversation with Ashlie. Is it starting to feel more like fall in Duluth?
Yes. Like, now people are actually having to, like, wear a little bit warmer clothing now,
Yeah.
and, like, I had a friend actually say, like, this is the first day that he's turned on the seat warmer in the car, and so now it feels like it's a different season. Like, that's how he basically marks fall in Duluth, is when he has to turn it on.
Like if it's cold enough for a Diluthian,
Yeah.
that sounds like a Star Trek alien race, a Diluthian to turn on the seat warmer, which sounds very Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, but I still imagine that being cold enough for a Diluthian to turn on the seat warmer is still colder
Yeah,
than
it's pretty
like,
cold. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so are you at the like 50 to 60 range yet?
We're at it says 61 today for the high, but it's been within the 50s kind of this week.
Yeah.
Earlier this week, though, it was beautiful. We actually went sailing, and
Ooh.
it was, like, perfect, like, exactly the temperature you want, still felt like summer. We don't really have the colors changing yet, but it's expected, like, this week or next it's gonna start really turning, so it feels like it's happening now.
And your beach is reasonably close to Superior or Huron?
Yep, we're Lake Superior. Like, I live literally 5 minutes from Lake Superior, so it's right here.
Okay. There's a level of jealousy that I'm feeling that feels like punishable at biblical like proportions.
Yeah, if you look on my, Facebook especially, there's pictures of me on the sailing trip, so you can see, like, the lake
Hmm.
and stuff. It was pretty awesome. It was a good trip.
Yeah. I am. Yeah. I'm not going to look because I'm going to become more jealous. Uh, uh, but thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that we get to reconnect in this particular way, but also like to talk about like more of your story. Thank you for being
No problem. Let me try my phone here for you so it doesn't make a sound.
here. I should do the same. You would think like after having recorded 20 episodes, I would be a half decent podcaster. So I'm gonna do the same check. Um, yeah.
I love your long hair, by the way, Polly.
Thank you. It's a lot of combing, number
Yep,
one.
yep, I just
Uh,
got done having long hair. It's excessive combing.
exactly. It's lots of combing. I have a like 0.00001% keratin conditioner that I always rinse with whenever it gets washed.
Yep,
That I'm very grateful for. That is supremely helpful. And
that's helpful.
also, just good Asian genes. What can I say?
Nice. I can only say that I've sort of in the same vein pool because I have a really good European and Hispanic genes, and so my hair tends to have a luster to it. But yeah, I mean, if it goes beyond a certain like lengthwise, then all of a sudden it gets super thick, and so it just depends on what it wants to do.
I don't think I knew that you had Hispanic heritage in your
I found
family.
out recently, like I don't know why no one told me this, but yeah, like I have part Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, which I just thought I would have gotten Italian just from being married to Chase, but like
Yeah.
apparently I actually legitimately have some Hispanic blood, which was the biggest family secret I've ever heard.
Scandalous. Spanish and Portuguese. Wow. Okay. That I would say, at least in my experience, if that is the height of like the family secrets, I think you're probably in good shape. At least
Oh
from
yeah.
from my side.
Yeah, no children unfounded in the family tree yet.
Whoops. Someone someone coming after the Castaldo family fortune, like whatever bastard child of great aunt Irma and Uncle Skeeter.
That'd be hilarious.
And but when we say Uncle Skeeter, we specifically mean Skeeter the Muppet.
Yep, exactly.
It's like half half felt and orange hair, and then I know I'm so jealous on multiple counts, mostly because I just love the fall so much, and a
Oh,
crisp 60-degree day
is the
sounds
best.
just like heaven compared to like the still halfway through September, the Ides of September upon us. Like 80 degrees in
Oh,
Center City, Philadelphia today.
I would still love that. Our summer was too short. I would trade with you if I could for a brief moment in time because I love the heat.
Did did spring run too long or did fall come too quickly? Or both?
Fall came too quickly in a way.
Yeah.
And we like Duluth is kind of weird in like we don't really have spring. It's just like it's like winter part two electric boogaloo. Like there's no real like flowering on the trees really, except for like a day. So like it just felt like winter, short
Yeah.
summer, and then fall came really fast.
when there's no sort of like transitional period and suddenly you go from like parka to shorts, what sort of I imagine that must take some sort of like emotional like fortitude to make that switch quickly.
Maybe I guess when you move here it probably does because but I've had days in Minnesota where it's literally it starts the day with a parka and snow, and then by noon it's 80 degrees and people are like having to go drive back home basically or have like extra like clothing in their car to deal with the deep intense changes of temperature. So if you live here long enough, you eventually deal with it. But yeah, it's frustrating sometimes.
You have your backup outfit like in the back of the car, or
Oh yeah,
that sort of reminds me a little bit of like the winters in Greenville, Illinois, where we met in college. That like
yep,
some it was so fickle. Like it would be just like so cold, like bone chilling, deep freeze cold, and then the next day it would be like 50 degrees.
yeah.
Tell me about like the journey to today. I know a little bit about Duluth from what we've chatted. I know a bit more about Greenville, but tell me the journey that brought you to like the person that Ashlie Castaldo is today.
Sure, I'll try and pare it down as much as I can to the basic points. But
Take your
so
time.
So I grew up in Duluth, and my family's pretty small, but I actually grew up in a household where there was domestic abuse.
Hmm.
So I grew up in a childhood where it was really common to see like yelling and screaming and hitting and just kind of having to deal with this one world and then pretend and go out
Hmm.
to the world with a different face on it in a lot of ways. And so at that age, you kind of learn to be protective and have coping mechanisms, self protection instincts, like lessons
Yeah.
that are definitely kids should not be dealing with at a young age.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's probably the biggest thing that's made me who I am, just because of having to face that adversity and then having the moments where, like, one of the things is that when I was a kid, I tried to let people know what was happening and nobody did anything about it.
Nobody
Um,
listened.
yeah, or they said, "We'll pray for you and hope it gets better." I talked to some people who are members of faith, and that's the response that you get. Um, and so when you see something like that, it makes you more focused on not letting other people go through the same. If you have any sense of empathy, that's kind of what you take away from it. Um, And so I kind of, whether or not this is like some kind of complex, but I always view myself as being someone who needs to make something better or save
Mhm.
some person from something that might be affecting them. And that's definitely a thing I've have to work on with counseling. And as I grow older, that I can't solve every problem,
Yeah.
even if that's my natural inclination to do so, especially as a parent. Um,
Mhm.
but as I got older, so I grew up in a Catholic household, and as I got older, evangelicism kind of creeped in culturally to me too, as well. Got into like Christian music, got into um, doing a lot of different like church-based things. Was really involved in youth group and that kind of stuff.
I want to expand a little bit more right there,
Sure.
because I also grew up in the evangelical space. Um, did you have a favorite Christian band at the time that
Oh,
you remember?
100%. So I don't know if you or your listeners will know this band, but Plus One, the Christian boy band.
I remember plus one. Um, listeners, imagine sort of like all of the actually because they started before that. Like I think they started in like the late '80s. So imagine like Backstreet Boys, but they were always wearing like a suit jacket with like a dress shirt, like a button down dress shirt that was like buttoned just a little bit, like one button higher than what it should have been to show like sexy, like Sternbush hair. Like shout out to Tim
That's actually a
Wilmington.
different one. They were like right at like in the early 2000s. And they ended up getting so big with the
Oh,
last flight out. That was like in like 20 something countries. They were even on like Disney and stuff. And
what?
like you could find them in like the teen magazines with the posters and stuff, like
Oh
letting you
God.
know like Nate loves you, Jason is into this, that like the entire goal for that band was to like get girls like attracted to these men and then basically eventually join the church. Like you can have a really hot guy who loves God. Don't you want to do that? Like that was the whole entire marketing ploy. And it was awful because like I came into evangelicism when I was like 14 or 15, like 13, 14, 15 years old. So like this was like my sexual awakening at the time. So you're mixing Jesus with like the exact moment that hormones set in. It's an absolute horrible way to begin your faith journey, honestly.
I know. First and foremost, I love that. The one that I'm thinking of is for him. It was like
Yes. Yep.
it was the number four plus the him, and it
Yep.
was this
Oh,
awful
they were
double
big too,
meaning.
though. That was like my mom was into that. Like when she
Yeah.
started listening, she's like, "I really like this group. They seem really talented for him." And she tried to drag me to it, but I was like, "Nope. I'm into the cool music now. I'm into the boy bands. I'm into these Christian girls who are talking about their purity in every single article. I won't listen to that thing." Like, I mean, it was some deep delusions at that age group.
I'm in the late '90s Christian music, mom.
Yeah, that was the era when they started like introducing the Jesus is my boyfriend type
Oh
trope with
God.
evangelicalism. And so like that was a big situation. That was a big proponent of that, like that idea that like Jesus is so great because he takes care of women, he wants to help the lesser people. But what if we just made him more buff? Wouldn't that be really cool? Wouldn't you want someone like that? And I mean, Freud would have a field day with it. The whole goal was to basically like fill some sort of need that teens clearly have at that age for some sort of
Yes.
intimacy. And
Yeah.
then you're like, if we just focus on this, we can ignore the fact that you're finding excuses to like do any sort of sexual contact but the big penetrative one. And like you're cool, like you're fine for youth group as long as you stick with all those outside things, and you pray to Jesus and he's your boyfriend at the end of the week. Like that was the entire summary of the Christian experience at that age. Yeah, it's just a weird situation.
So what was like young adult like youth group life? And I suppose you could probably say like undergraduate college too. I mean, because we both went to the same
Yeah.
like private Christian liberal arts college. So like it's essentially like grade 13 youth group, or at least it was for me.
Oh yeah, totally. I know, like for at least in our youth group, like it was a weird situation where there was like a lot of bullying, especially in youth group. Like there's a
Hmm.
very big pecking order with the girls, and like I loved youth group. Like I liked going out and doing the events, and like when we switched past youth pastors, there was kind of a different
Yeah.
dynamic that I appreciated. But there's a brief period of time where the understanding was that there was popular girls at youth group, and they got the guys. And so there's kind of like that social dance, like on top of it, where you're like being really holy to like impress teenagers, but you're supposed to also have fun and like get to know them and do like activities. So there's like a
Yeah.
very weird like cutthroat kind of like Lord of the Flies situation with religion
Yeah.
when you go to youth group. But I still enjoyed it. But this is also around a time when like I was having my first like mental health
Mm.
episode, and so when you have those hormones and those emotions, it's just there's no good way to like make it out except to just make it out alive. That's really the only thing you can do at that point.
Yes. You mean that it's you mean that teens dissociate in the middle of things because they don't understand their bodies or social dynamics? Get out of here.
I know. And, like, just like, just the, like, lack of social approval, like, if you're getting
Yeah.
rejected
Yeah.
as a teenager, you're like, "What does this mean about myself?" Like, you're telling me
Yeah.
that God loves me, but everyone in the room hates me, so what does that even mean? And so there's, like, the whole dichotomy about who are you as a person, not just teenager, but, like, as a human being,
Yeah.
and how do you view yourself within that?
What I think I hear is just an earnest desire to like find your people, to be a part of a community.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, like, during that time, like, uh, I started having, like, where I was sleeping a lot, and I just thought that was
Yeah.
being a teenager, like, and I just thought that was, like, God's burden for me to carry is just to, like,
Yeah.
feel awful. Um, and so, like, going through that further in high school was a really transition period. Um, and but, like, once I got to Greenville when I met you and, you know, we went to undergrad and stuff,
Yeah.
like, the first, like, I wanna say year of Greenville was amazing. Like, I can't express how great it was, like, um, imagine going from being in high school and feeling like the ugly duckling and feeling like nobody likes you, and then you're going and you get to be have it like a whole new personality, whole new clean slate.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really great, and, like, I would define that period as, like, the sexual revolution for me. Like,
Mm.
even if you're not supposed to say that or experience that, you're still going to a college where there's a bunch of really attractive people your age,
Yeah.
and there's no real limitations unless you have some sort of education to back you up and be like, "Listen, we're gonna be doing this, 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 and this. Are you okay with it?" It was like people just found excuses just to like have any physical contact at that point.
Yes.
Um, so that was just a really weird like addition to my identity. Is you're moving from like being this child to this teenager, and now you have to be a woman. And what does that include
Yeah.
now for your future?
That would have been like 2005. Oh
Yep,
my god, I feel so old.
I know.
Uh, but like the early 2000s sense of style, like where all of the male-bodied people were in that sort of like emo or hipster space, which usually included two sizes too small jeans.
Yes, which made the irony even more thick because like, you're spending time where we have, like, women having, like, you know, attire rules and, like, "Hey, you know, don't
Yeah.
wear your skirt too high up," and I'm like, "But this guy right next to me is worshiping Jesus, and, like, there's no illusion." I mean,
Yeah.
what are you asking? Like, I almost
Yeah.
want to yell at people, be like, "Hey, you want it? You're, dressed like that, you sure do." Like, I mean, you almost wanna have that, like, sort of, like, gender equality situation going on because it's just ridiculous.
And the other side of it, like, you had better wear a full shirt and not half one. And if we
Oh,
see a
yeah.
belly button, like,
Yeah, I remember there was, like, when we first started, there was, like, a big, like, campus-wide, like, notice because they found, like, at a Halloween party or something, a bunch of women were wearing, like, scandalous costumes and stuff, and they were just like, "This is gonna be, you know, like, orgies everywhere. If we have, like, one more woman just wear, like, a sexy Minnie Mouse costume, it's gonna be game over. Everyone's gonna be destroyed, the rapture's happening." Like, I mean, if there was a hint of, like, any sort of expression, it had to be clamped down pretty quickly or taken off campus.
thinking more widely speaking about evangelicalism, why do you think every time that it's exposed to an experience of difference, that it seems that the only thing is to feel for an evangelicalism to do is to feel threatened?
I can only think that evangelicalism has a preoccupation with like punishment. And
Mm,
so there's a deep desire, there's things that are supposed to be wrong or bad.
mm,
Because like I feel, especially in the authority place, like there has to be control. And I almost assume like there's some sort of psycho dominant background. Like you feel safe by having that control. Um,
mm.
and in turn, there's just like different psychosexual reactions to that because um, like
Yep.
like when I went to Greenville, I had my first same sex experience there.
Yeah.
Like, you would not think that of Ventral campus, but under, like, the surface, you have a lot of people who are just like, we don't like this authoritarianism. So what do you do in response to it? You have like this just it's either all or nothing within the evangelical worldview. You're either
Yeah.
absolutely terrible or something's absolutely good, and the only way to remedy that is with punishment.
Or unearned, abusively excessive reward.
Exactly.
Do we still believe in evangelicalism as capable of social good?
I mean, that's a really good question because I've really thought back on that, back and forth on that. Because like, I know evangelicals who are great people and
Yeah.
are doing great things within that capacity. But, like, when you ask me about, like, the system itself or evangelicalism as a movement, I don't think you can. Um, I just don't
Mm,
know that there's, like, the philosophical framework to make it be beneficial long term.
yeah.
I think at a certain point, either the doubts bury you and you leave, or you just have to like pick and choose to the point where it's not even evangelism to begin with, and you just leave the pieces and walk away also. So, um, I mean, I think there's got to be better, better philosophical or theological backgrounds for us to get to where we need to be in a better place in society than evangelism at this point.
Is there anything you think that the broader world of Christianity can learn from the implosion of evangelicalism?
I think so. I think one of the big things that we can learn from is to understand that at the beginnings of our church, the beginnings of our faith, were not like perfect to begin with.
Mm,
You're taking a group of church beings who had incredibly messy backgrounds. Someone was a fisherman, someone was a tax collector,
yeah.
someone even betrayed the savior
Yeah.
and like committed suicide. So these are not people who are like 100% perfect individuals. And then you're
Mm,
taking those stories and those people who create the largest religious social movement that's ever happened in history. You're taking their works and you're bringing them to councils and they groups of men arguing over what is valid and what's important and what means things.
mm,
There's not having women, there's no minorities at the table, there's nothing there. So it's just it's moving from one mess to the next. And you're taking all these narratives and all of these movements within the faith and you're expecting perfection and you're expecting it to be the
yeah.
exact perfect thing that needs to be. Um, and I think a lot of us will have to be like a reckoning with how we deal with linguistics, honestly. You know, what does the word inspired mean? What does it mean to say like something's created from or born um,
Mm,
from God? Like, how we view that word and what that means and pertain to our life and whether something has validity to change ourselves.
mm. I want to pivot a little bit. To an outsider, Duluth is an unexpectedly progressive place. Please tell me a little bit more. Help me understand.
Yeah, especially within like having like a rearview perspective. Like growing up, I just assumed that that's what life was like. That people recycled, people
Mm,
went to the lake, you know, people hike all the time. I just assumed that that was what the rest of the world was like. Um,
mm,
that was not the case that I learned when I went to eventually to Illinois.
yeah.
Um, so like we have like a very I would say Scandinavian way of approaching life. You know, people like stick to themselves. People are very helpful if you ask for it.
Mhm.
Um, but like we don't like our things messed with. So you won't see people like polluting. Everyone picks up the trash. I mean, everyone wants to do what they can to make it so it looks comfortable and green. Is really the idea. And as far as social issue goes, we have like a lot of progressive background and past a lot of progressive things, which is really, I think, it'd be shocking that someone would think of within a Midwestern area.
The notes that I have from our previous chats is that Duluth has a borderline religious, like bordering on the religious level of respect for nature.
Oh yeah,
Where does that come from?
yeah, I think it comes from a marriage between 2 separate cultures, the indigenous culture, because they
Yeah.
view a lot of it, especially with indigenous backgrounds, view nature as its own entity and its own personhood.
Mm,
But then you're talking about like the Scandinavians, and they have like Lutheranism, Methodism, like the whole gamut of like high church
mm,
learning. And there's a big understanding of like God being the creator, and so hard work, you know, farming, like you take care of the earth, because the earth benefits you, it feeds your family. And so when you kind of have that intersection where both communities kind of can agree on something, it's kind of like the baseboard or the foundation for like the whole rest of the community, how they view nature as a whole. So it's a big thing for us.
a lot of Minnesota, Duluth in particular, sits on reasonably like valuable potential parcels of um, natural resources, but
Yeah.
you, the community, like actively protested the mining and like won.
Yeah, like if there's anything where it's like there's people thinking that they're gonna be doing tremendous amounts of like moving particles or risking
Yeah.
any harming to this Lake Superior. I mean, we've had individuals protest as far up as northern Minnesota because of it. That's what Line 3 was about the potential for risk to our environment. And
Mm.
if there's even a whiff of someone doing something untoward or not being researched or not having the studies to back it up, we don't tolerate that kind of thing.
There's this part of this town that is in everyone that almost feels like it transcends political affiliations.
Yeah, I think we've definitely noticed like there's more issues politically between parties within recent years in the past administration. But there seems to be things that affect the core identity of Duluth, and we just don't have disagreements on that, like what it means to be Duluthian. And so that's the kind of unifying message that I think we all have with each other.
So give me the rundown. What does it mean to be Duluthian?
I would say to be Duluthian means that you care about your neighbors and you care about what's affecting them,
Mm.
um, but you give them the love and the freedom to do what they need to do to be the best that they can be, even if that's
Mm.
alone in their own personhood. And just being a good steward to the community as a whole. I think that's a very Duluthian value. You and I, we came to college like when MySpace was out.
Yeah.
And so when you see from MySpace to Facebook and then the transition all through those media, it's
Yeah.
the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more connections that we have to spread, not just like memories, but just also falsehoods too. Um, and that really, I think it's going to change exactly how we view the political landscape and social landscape, I think, for years to come.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, just this. You're sitting at home in Duluth. I'm sitting in a conference room in Philly. Let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about the question of media and politicking, because this is your work. This is what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird journey to make that transition. Like within the time of my marriage and end of Greenville, um, I had a really deep dark period back to back where even at Greenville I remember being in Seattle on a Seattle trip, and there was a
Mm,
point where I was with the group and I was looking over the bridge and I was thinking of jumping over, um just because I I mean I was still in the circle where you believe that if you're having depression or sadness it must be because you're not having a faith or it's
mm,
some sort of lesson that's God giving you. And so having that, and then back to back with another episode, I eventually found myself within Springfield realizing like enough is enough. I got to get better. Um,
yeah.
and luckily, thank goodness, I haven't had any issues that were severe like that. I'm pretty on top of my health, but um, having that experience, additional adversity, kind of changed. Like I wouldn't say that was like the first step to like getting into politics because I was able
Mm,
to see like the lack of proper mental health resources we had, not just in Illinois, but I could see the difference in other states from what people were talking about who were dealing with the same issue. And I want to know why that was, and why does one group have something and another group doesn't have that? Um,
Before you move on, I want to
sure.
say thank you for not jumping. Um, I, among many others, among so many other voices that I'm sure are much closer, I'm just grateful that you're here.
Well, thank you,
And
Molly.
no, it's just one of those things. Like I think like in my own spaces where I've been, like where my mental health has been much more raw and much less regulated. Um, like in all of like my own experiences of like depression and trauma and like neurodivergence,
Yeah,
like there's sometimes the work of survival, of getting to bed at the end of the night, like isn't itself the act of resistance and the act that's
exactly.
needed just to keep going. And that's like sometimes that just needs to be enough.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point that you're making there because I think we don't understand like the act of resistance is political in nature itself, um,
Mm.
and
Mm.
has a lot of gospel undertones too, especially when you think of the character of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like the idea of fighting is just naturally like an act of revolution, no matter how small we view it. And so for myself, like that was like I think the big first step to kind of being on a path of empowerment and saying, what does that mean? Why do I want to be empowered? Um, and then kind of within that time frame, I was discovering that like, hey, I might be autistic. And so you begin that diagnosis, and I kind of had to like rebuild my identity back up, because I honestly at the point believed like, wow, I must be a really stupid individual. I don't know if I have this, else is wrong with me. And so you kind of
Mm,
break yourself open, and the putting yourself back together to figure out who you are, um, can seem like the weakest, but it can be the strongest point too, because at that point you could literally be anything you want to be,
mm,
um,
mm,
realistic at the end of the day. And so that was the first step for me. Um, and then of course Trump coming into office definitely changed exactly how I thought what we need to do. Like there was obviously a panic. Like there's an immediate like we have to do something. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something.
yeah.
Um, and then I want to say like the final big event for me from my adulthood that really kind of got me to where I'm at and changed things for me, was when my student died. Um, Teaching a 7-month old and having a child be abused and then getting word that the child died because of that abuse, um, and there's nothing you can do about it, really, it makes you lose faith in the system.
Yeah.
You start to wonder why things aren't working, and you have these questions about good versus evil. Where are the people who are supposed to help us? They weren't there. Why aren't they doing it? Um, and this is, I feel like for me, like a lot of what I do is I'm helping live for someone else who can't be there. There's a life that was 7 months old in that
Yeah.
short tiny frame. What are the things that she's missing out on? What can I
Yeah.
do to compensate for her? Um, and then in turn, being a mother, you always want your kid to have the best world. So just that kind of constant desire to fill some sort of a hunger, I guess, for doing something better or making it better than it was before is, I think, the
Yeah.
driving factor for me.
The that I'm reminded that you live in Minnesota, and like you have like the horrifying deaths of Philando Castile and like George Floyd are in like your backyard.
Yeah, I actually I worked tangentially with Philando Castile during the time I was a teacher during then, and I was actually training at the sites. And so for when it happened, it was jarring. I mean, I can't speak on it personally because it's not my family, it's not my story and my
Yeah.
history. But it does shape where you're from. And then George Floyd is a whole other, social, political, cultural movement in itself. Um,
Yeah.
and so when you're dealing with back-to-back reckonings in a way,
Yeah.
it really does shape how you trust authority, and what you feel it needs to get done in order to create reconciliation for people.
When is there time when there is all of this hurt and pain and profound horrifying violence against black bodies? When is there time to come up for air?
Y- you know, I don't I don't know, because my experience is shaped in such different ways than even the black bodies themselves,
Yeah.
that I don't know what you do to take it except to listen. Um,
Yeah.
all I can do as in my personal capacity is that if someone needs help, I want them to take me in and help me do the hard work, or let me do the hard work for them. Um, and there are days, when my life is tough, but there are days when I'm absolutely grateful for the privilege that I have,
Mm.
because I can just step into spaces that other people can't reach, and people do listen to me. And if I can be sort of a mouthpiece for that and helping to alleviate pain and suffering for other people, that's what I'm going to do. As hard as it is, that's what my my job and my hope is. Um, and I think so much of it is otherization, and we don't spend time in communities with each other. We
Mm.
don't go out of our way to be in different cultural backgrounds or religious backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's hard to hate the face that you love. Is
Yes.
really what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
From your space, working in local city government, in a role that feels like the Duluth version of like Scandal, like Olivia Pope, from the way that you've described it,
That's perfect. Yeah.
made me think of what are the little things that can help people know each other?
One of the things, at least I've tried to do to help people know each other or make people aware of things is,
Yeah.
I've made it a real intentional choice to embrace empathy as a strength.
Mm.
and listen to as many people as possible. I don't turn away people when they talk to me.
Mm.
I have a pretty open door policy when it comes to messaging me. People can send emails, they can call, they can do whatever they need to do to let me know that the issue that they have.
Mm.
I might not be on city council, but I know that I can give space and time to people so they at least feel heard.
Yeah.
And if I can, within my capacity, to give it off to people who can answer those questions. Um, but I think the biggest thing is we have to stop pretending like being a strong man or being this big, public figure is the way to gain trust. I think empathy is really powerful. And I think doing what you can to make it clear that you're going to be an active listener, a good listener, I think I think that's, if you want to be successful in local government, that's an unconventional, but very strategic way of going about it.
So, where does the capacity for empathy come from? You have this capacity to talk to anyone. Where does that come from?
I think there's two like strengths that wherever it comes from. One is I just don't really deny myself experiences.
Mm.
I love meeting new people and I love trying new things, and it's hard to be afraid of things if you try them.
Yeah.
Um, and the more experience that you build up, the more connections you can create and more conversational pieces for people.
Mm.
So that's really helpful. But this is kind of one of the benefits of having autism. Um, there's a real lack of fear of like social repercussion in some ways. I don't have the same like low threshold of social rejection that most people do.
Mm.
Um, and even with like, trying to get better at, social cues and stuff, like there are just social signs that I don't read properly,
Yeah.
or read facial expressions. And so because I don't have that barrier, I kind of just go ahead the way I want to. And if I want a piece of information, I just keep going forward and asking it.
Yeah.
And I don't really exist in the world of small talk. People find out that if they get to know me, I get pretty deep pretty quickly. Um, and it's kind of jarring. So I kind of know my real relationships and authentic, request pretty early on in a conversation because
Mm.
people will be into that or they won't. It, there's no real being iffy on that.
Mm.
And so I think that that kind of helps cultivate a really empathetic worldview.
Since you raised it, let's lean in a little bit more. We increasingly have public media capital to be able to talk about mental illness in a real way, neurodivergence in a real way. How close are we to being able to talk about autism in a way that is actually productive and generative, like in the public, or are we just like years down the road?
I think I think it feels far away
Yeah.
on some respects on paper, because there isn't really like a lot of like autism legislation. Even with disability law, we're still kind of behind.
Mm.
Even when I talk to people about like what basic accommodations are, there's still a huge misunderstanding of what is an actual need and what's a handicap,
Mm.
vice versa. So I think that there is some traditionalism on there. But I do think that we're going to start seeing a real big awakening kind of autistic individuals making progress and making, noise. Elon Musk, being like the most prominent known person, it's hard for him not to take up media space and draw
Mhm.
attention to
Mhm.
that. As much as you disagree with him, I mean, when you have like the most richest person on the planet with a neurodivergent diagnosis, it's really hard not for that to
Yeah.
be a focal point, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and and I'm really fortunate because if I do get on city council, I'll be, I think, the first openly autistic individual in a local office outside of, like, I have a friend who is autistic and she's on a school board, but as far as like actual um like legislative body, I
Yeah.
think I would be the first one, to my knowledge. And I've been hearing that there's a lot more autistic individuals who are running for office, and
Mm.
so eventually those
Mm.
spaces are going to get filled up. um I think where the big discussion points too, I think we're going to see is uh sexual issues regarding disabilities, especially in the autistic community. There's still in movies, there's this big idea that autistic individuals are like asexual, or sexist individuals who don't communicate on that level.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we're going to start seeing, it's my hope, honestly, that we see more people who are like proud of their bodies,
Mm.
and proud of intimacy. Um, and they view autism as as, intimate strength and not something that's, a taboo. I'm hoping that we can see more of that idea that, autism is sexy. Um, because as stupid as it sounds, it really is kind of like a great equalizer.
Yeah.
Once you're able to give people dignity that they can be sexual beings and that they're worthy of being attracted or validated, then there's more equity down the line, I think, for all of us. I think people wanna love and be loved, and anything that we can do in a disability moment to get people to feel that way is the best thing we can do.
There is such power and capacity to know someone when you find the way to acknowledge and to amplify human dignity. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, especially in society, we use phrases like, to make someone feel like a man or, um, you know, even men will compare themselves by how they can please a woman or please
Yeah.
their partner.
Yeah.
Um, and if we don't afford that ability to other people, there's like a whole other realm of competency that we're denying people. Um, and I don't think we understand like in our day-to-day life, it's funny, it's a
Yeah.
joke, it's like, ooh, that's a seedy taboo, but we don't like think in our daily life like that is really something that people take into the outside world. Am I competent in my own home and behind closed doors?
Hmm.
That drastically affects how we view our own abilities outside in the workplace
Hmm.
and in social circles. Um, and I think that's going to be an important point for social discussion, I think, in the future.
For people who may be a little bit less familiar, can you give us the dime tour of autism? Help us understand a little bit about what it is.
Sure. So, depending on who you ask, it's viewed as a developmental disorder. Other people just kind of view it as like a cluster of social impairments or learning disorders.
Hmm.
At least in my own experience, I I've worked really hard to have like really strong verbal skills.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good socially overall. There's just there's quirks is what I would say. Um, but it can also be defined by spatial issues or executive functioning dysregulation. There's different things that
Hmm.
can be involved with it. Sensory overload too. Like there's times where I can't be in large crowds,
Yeah.
or if I'm shopping, it becomes overwhelming, and I'll do what is called stimming, like engaging in like repetitive behaviors to calm myself down.
Mhm.
And that's been a huge part of my journey is being okay with that. Because growing up, like I would even have I don't know how I went this long without being diagnosed because, like,
Mm.
I did stimming behaviors as a young kid. I remember there's a period where I was constantly closing my eyes,
Mm.
and people would tell me, "Stop, what are you doing?" And I didn't realize at the time that that was, "Oh, that's like a sensory thing."
Yeah.
Um, and so I've had to, like, learn how to accept myself and be okay with it. I still don't do it out in public, but, like, I now I'm at the place where I'm okay in my home, and if things get overwhelming, like, I have to go in and release it essentially. Um, But so that's autism in a nutshell. Is kind of like if you see like a wheel of different symptoms, um, and you can have be on one end in one area and one on the other as far as where you're at with abilities. It's just like a kaleidoscope of uh, different behaviors that we view as being awkward or dysfunctional in comparison to normative society.
Thank you. It's very gracious to be able to make that connection. I suppose to a certain extent, that kind of follows your commitment to be present and to hear and to offer a good story, to offer human dignity to someone else.
Thank you. Yeah, there has to be openness.
Yeah, there has to be
Yeah.
openness. You told me like there are a couple misconceptions that I wanted to highlight, and one of them is that autism is by far not a one size fits all thing.
Not even close. And part of the misconception is because for so long they've only diagnosed boys with it. It was viewed as a boys
Mm,
disorder. Girls could have ADD, but autism was pretty much exclusively reserved for boys.
mm,
And so you kind of get this perception that autistic individuals are just screaming, uh, asexual, or borderline sociopathic characters if you're watching television.
yeah.
Um, but that's not the case at all. We come in as many shades and hues as literally any other demographic that exists out there.
You told me also that the prevailing concept of savantism is just not based in any sense of reality.
No, I mean, I think savantism is one of those things. one, they're very rare in society. I mean,
Mm,
we can all think of like all the savants we've seen because they make movies about them.
yeah.
This isn't like a big culture community of savantism. Um, but it's really indicative of autism in general, where you have like these really high like capacities for certain things and knowledge in certain areas and then
Mm.
low in other areas, and that discrepancy. So it's like a really great catch-all for explaining that.
Is spectrum a fair language to use? Is that okay, or should I not
I
be using
think
that?
that I think at least in the most top groups of people I talk to, they prefer spectrum or like a gradient. You can
Okay.
use either term for that.
So someone who's here in like the someone who's somewhere along the gradient, um, uh, someone who's certainly not like your strengths might be here, your liabilities might be here, and so I'm imagining is like the further along you might be in that gradient, the wider the chasm between these sets of things would
Exactly.
potentially manifest. Okay, I got it.
That's exactly how it looks. Yep.
The last piece that you mentioned is that there are multiple creative ways to overcoming the challenges to forming emotional connection.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I've known like there's a lot of I don't know if you saw this one YouTube video that was making the rounds a couple years ago, but there was actually an autistic individual who would show up at Star Trek cons, conventions, and
Mm.
he actually talked to Whoopi Goldberg and said like he watched
Wow.
Star Trek, and she was her favorite character, um, and like he would watch Star Trek to learn social cues and how to adapt to different people,
Mm.
and then it would make him prepared to go to conventions,
Mm.
and he was finally able to have like actual real relationships for his time by going to these conventions and talking with people,
Mm.
and he like oh, it's hard to talk about, but like, um, he actually went and he found a girlfriend, and for the first time, he felt like a normal person, and he thanked her because that's what Star Trek gave him. Um, and we don't look at things in real life as being successful coping strategies or creative ones,
Mm.
um, but that's just like that's su- that's one such really important thing. Like in part of my process, I watched a lot of House MD with Hugh
Mm.
Laurie. Um, like I watched it like I want to say like 4 seasons, like 4 times in a row, all 8 seasons.
Yeah.
Um, and even at my lowest moment, like I would watch it and I would watch him and I'd be like, you know what? Even if I'm alone in this world, there's this one other person who understands me. And that should have been my biggest indicator that there was like a diagnosis that was coming up on my journey because,
Yeah.
um, like we don't think of it, but that like even if it's a fake sense of connection, it feels real.
Hmm.
And when you have that kind of like life raft in the sea of adversity, when you're having, like losing friends because you can't connect with someone, or you're
Yeah.
having like an inability to hold a job because you have poor executive function, these things,
Yeah.
like they at least make you feel like you're making progress in the midst of having to like learn to move past adversity.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite storyline or episode that you remember?
Well, the one of the ones is when he actually meets the autistic patient and they have to
Yeah.
connect over the video game.
Yeah.
That obviously was a big thing.
Hmm.
Um, but for myself, just I want to say Dr. 13's descent into losing her health.
Yeah.
Um, and then the episode with Amber and House having to reconstruct the train accident. I want to say like those were the top three moments for me within the show.
There was in spite of like all the fine fantastic performances there like to your point there is just such incredible writing underneath too.
Oh, I mean, absolutely nailed it. There's very few
Mm.
shows I think that were amazing, like all seasons. The Wire is another one, but House is like, I mean, that's within the purview. I would say like incredible storytelling.
We keep coming back to this piece of story, so I want to ask you for another one. What was parenting during the pandemic like for
I mean, it's a strengthening exercise, but I wouldn't wish it on someone, is what I would say. Uh, because I mean, I love my son. He's a
Yeah.
great kid. I'm doing the best I can to raise him, and he has a great father and a great extended family helping.
Yeah.
Um, but there's nothing beneficial and healthy to a kid being only with their parents 24/7. There's no way you can help your kid not be stunted in that situation. Um, Kids need to be with other kids and they need to be at school. And, um, I think the problem is that when you have your kids with you, it starts to really fray that relationship between parent and kid into being like this person is your only source of connection.
Mm,
And I think that can complicate the family dynamic in some ways that I don't think we're even like dealing with after COVID yet. Um,
yeah.
but I mean, I was really fortunate and blessed. Like I have strong family support system. I have a really good spouse, so we can work well with each other. Um, but yeah, I don't think I don't I certainly as a parent wouldn't be signing up for another round of that.
It's hard for me to think of anyone who would.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
there's some people who said that they loved life then, and I didn't gain anything beneficial. I just ended up engaging in really poor coping mechanisms like drinking too much because I had nothing to do that day
yeah.
and nowhere to go, and I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and so you make these really, even if you're supposed to be quote unquote safe, you're not mentally safe and you're making poor decisions.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, thank goodness, like for a huge portion of it, there was the outside and I could go out and do walks and stuff, but you're in a place where you don't know and anxiety's high. And so I'm just glad that we're kind of adjusting back to a model where people are kind of, taking a breather, like, okay, we're gonna we're gonna not be as reactive as we were the first time around is what I'm thankful for. Even in Minnesota, we're you know
Yeah.
everyone's like was big on being getting vaccinated and people are openly embracing getting boosted. Um, I just think people have such fatigue about the social dynamics
Yeah.
that even if it's bad, I don't know if people will even let it phase them. I think we reached a point where it's just too much at one time, and people are just gonna exist and try and survive the best they can.
Is there anything that like local policy can do to look out for like looming like mental health crisis?
Yeah. I think one of the main things is, especially a reframing of messaging and marketing. For one, is I
Mm,
think going to be the best way of doing it. I think we didn't handle that correctly the first go round, and
sure.
I made publicly my complaints about that beforehand. Like in our prior discussions, I mentioned for however the level of things that can get bad, there's an absolute opposite reaction, and that means that's exactly how good things can get.
Yes.
Um, and I think if people are saying, this is a bad situation, we take that time to rise to the occasion
Mm,
and make it the exact opposite in as positive as soon as possible in how we handle the situations. Um, and so I think just a reframing of it, first of all, like, we're doing our part, we're all in this together.
yeah.
Uh, we're we want us all to be safe and healthy and have the best Christmas season possible. If you can like have those positive messages, I think we'll be in a lot better place this time around,
Mm.
personally. But that's whether people decide to have that enthusiasm or not, I guess, is the real labor.
So thinking more to the future, what's next for Ashlie Castaldo? One of the things that you told me that I would love to hear in particular about is dreams for what you'll do when you become elected to city council.
Um, my hope, well, right now, I mean, the short term and long term of it is,
Yeah.
I'm hoping to be working on a couple more political campaigns for other candidates.
Mhm.
In some capacity. Like currently, right now, I'm working for a grassroots organization called Undivided, and that's helping Northland, Minnesota, that region, kind of be willing to get rid of the whole bipartisanship issues that are bothering us and strengthening democracy and protecting it, and getting people to vote to protect the federal the way of living that we enjoy the freedom and democracy, all the things that make America great.
Mhm.
Um, in spite of the political landscape that we have going on. So I'm currently finishing out the election cycle with that. Um, and I'm hoping to get involved within the campaign for mayor and city council for City of Duluth. I'm helping with that. But I've talked it out with people who support me and with the people who I care about, and I am absolutely going to be running for Duluth City Council next the next spot that's open for it.
Mm.
Um, and I'm going to continue bringing that platform that I had with my prior city council campaign, and bring that within city and helping empower people. So I want to increase economic development, economic investment, um, increase housing rights, protect the locals, and make it clear that the locals are not going to be pushed out of their homes
Yeah.
and their communities, and make a really great place for people to raise their families. That's so important to me is having strong family and communal relationships. And so just doing what I can to speak on that and the issues of the people who spend their time in the quiet to talk to me and make them know that they're needed and important. That's my goal for future.
Yeah. So you just got like small things.
Yeah, just weekend things like just gigs.
You told me once you got a call that sounded like it came straight out of some sort of like political serial TV show where someone called you and said, "We like your work. What would it take for you to come and work with us?"
Yeah. So this is this is how you can tell like politics is a game for some people. It's
Yeah.
like a giant chessboard.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also kind of refreshing way because you can realize that both sides are not that different. Um, like like we have different names, but realistically, it doesn't matter who the person is as long it's what matters is on this what side
Yep.
they're on. In a lot of these
Yep.
discussions, I don't, orientate my political philosophy that way, but it's definitely within the larger picture, and I think people can see
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Um, but I end up I want to say roughly 6 months ago, I got called by the GOP, um, and they asked me if I wanted to work on an exploratory campaign for some individuals who are thinking of being the Republican presidential nominee, and with some of the lower level Republican offices,
Hmm.
and they included DeSantis. He was one of the names that was thrown up on there, and I had to talk to them, and say, listen, like who I am, right? Like this isn't. It's not like I'm pretending. I'm very vocal about my values and where I stand, and the organizations I volunteer with. I'm a board member on the DFL Environmental Caucus,
Yeah.
outreach inclusion officer. There's I mean, if you're talking about like hiding something, I'm not hiding anything by any means. Um, but they were like, "Well, you seem competent. Like, are you?" Um, and so it's like, "Well, thanks, I guess." And I was like, I was like, "But is that gonna be a problem for you, my progressive values?" And like, "Well, like, what can you handle dealing with?" Like, they were actually like wanting to know what I could reasonably like be okay with promoting and sleep at night with.
So the thing that I take away from all of this is that all of this shit is 100% real.
I mean, people think like House of Cards and Scandal is like pretend. It kind of is, but it's more real than people think it is. And Parks and Recreation is definitely like a documentary. Like it might as
Oh
well
yeah.
be marked as a documentary.
I I well, yes. So the the thing that I just find so fascinating about this sense of impact that you have is that everyone is welcome. Like you took that phone call. You didn't just sort of you didn't just go hello like RNC click.
Yeah, because one of the things I have and why I'm thankful for the experience I have is most of my family is GOP.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
most of my family is Republican. Um, and again, like I bring it back, it's really hard to hate the people you love.
Yeah.
Um, I see I see Republicanism and Trumpism as a very broken ideology, and I have huge feelings of anger towards Trumpism in general. But it's hard for me to have the capacity inside to cut myself off from people unless there's
Yes.
something obscenely egregious. Um, and I don't blame the woman on the end who's working the HR and trying to fill this position. She
Yeah.
has a job, she has a family she's taking care of. I don't consider her the architect of the movement by any means. So I'll give someone time if they're offering it to me, and hopefully we can have some sort of middle ground. And I felt really positive about the conversation because she even agreed with me on certain things and said, that's a really great way of viewing stuff. Um, but people don't change and movements don't change unless you give space to listening and to have real dialogue. Um, and it's a tough thing to practice, but it has to be done consistently, or we're never going to make any headway in the future.
There's usually one question that I ask people as the last point of conversation, and here it is. What do you want the world to look like when you're done with it?
I hope that when I leave far sometime in the future,
Yeah.
um, I hope we can get a little closer to like the actual, like core reading of Martin Luther King, where we state like we don't see them for the color of their skin, but for the content of their actions.
Hmm.
And I'd like to be in a world where we don't view differences as things that are to be afraid of or to box people in. I want to have people engaging in identity politics at that point.
Mm.
I want to be a thing where um, we're viewing people on what they've done and what they've brought to the
Yeah.
table and the actions that they've created. And I think the best we can do to make the world a better place where people feel open, accepted, and heard and important, and that people have some sort of value and dignity. That's what I want. I would like to see a way we can at least measurably define and have as much quality of life for people as possible. So leave it in a way where people have better schools, better homes, better health. Um, I don't know necessarily like the specifics what that would look like, but that's the general feeling and sense that I hope that I can leave, that people can smile and say today was a good day.
Mm. What do you think is one thing that we can be doing to move towards those ends? What's one thing we could do today?
One, so I think the biggest thing you can do is kind of a half and half, like a asterisk attached to it is one, read.
Mm.
Read as much as you can get your hands on. You got to get as much information, data, come to the table as prepared as you can. The best prepared people are the ones who are the most easily who can be put into action. And so reading, I mean, it changes how you view the world and how you view people. Um, and this life is short. Don't deny yourself experiences if they come your way. Um, the more things we can do to create a better narrative for ourselves and that we can share with others is, I think, it seems small and powerless, but I think it's the best way we can act without having the power privilege on our side.
My thanks to my guest, Ashlie Castaldo. You can follow her on Facebook at Ashlie Marie Castaldo and Twitter at Ashlie City. Thank you for tuning in to Uncommon Good with Pauli Reese. This program is produced in Southwest Philadelphia on the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape tribe and the Black Bottom community. If you enjoyed listening to the show, please support us by leaving us a 5-star review and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help people find us. Uncommon Good is also available on YouTube and Instagram. Follow us there for accessible video content and more goodies. We love questions and feedback. You can send us a DM on Instagram or an email at uncommongoodpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, wishing you every uncommon good, to do your uncommon good, to be the uncommon good.